Okay, let's just jump right in. We're going to unpack this really incredible story of speed.
It's a great
We're
word.
talking about how four specific places, four economies, basically hit the fast forward button on their entire way of life.
And all within a single generation, really. It's one of the most amazing economic stories of the last century. We're focusing on what everyone calls the Asian tigers.
Right. Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan.
Exactly. And if you just look at the timeline, say from the early 1960s to the 1990s, the speed of change is almost hard to believe. They went from being pretty poor, developing nations.
Where most people were farmers.
Yeah, mostly farming.
Yeah.
And they became these high-income, tech-savvy global powerhouses.
A change that big, that fast, it can't be random. There has to be an engine behind it. What was the core driver?
It was a very deliberate sort of twin-engine approach. First, it was all about selling things to richer countries, massive amounts. We call that an export-led strategy.
Okay, exports. What's the second engine?
Plowing the money from those exports right back into their own system. Just heavy, targeted investment in factories, roads, and maybe most importantly, in their own people.
That focus is key. But to really get how impressive this all was, we have to look at where they started. I mean, they weren't exactly beginning with a lot of advantages.
No, not at all. The situation was dire. After the big global conflicts of the mid-20th century, these places were genuinely poor.
So if I was living there in, say, the 1950s,
Chances are you'd be working on a farm, living in a rural area. They lacked pretty much all the basics for a modern economy.
when you say they lacked infrastructure, what does that actually mean for someone's day-to-day life?
It means the roads were bad, electricity was spotty at best, and there was very little industrial machinery. I mean, think about it. Most things were still being made by hand.
Wow.
And on top of that, education levels were generally low, so the government had this huge job just to get people ready for basic factory work, let alone anything high-tech.
Geographically, though, they're kind of a mixed bag, which is interesting.
A very mixed bag. South Korea and Taiwan are bigger, they have more natural resources to start with. But then you have Hong Kong and Singapore, which are tiny.
Yeah, Singapore is basically a city on an island.
Right. And they have almost no raw materials, no big farms, no mines. But despite all those differences, they shared one massive geographical advantage.
Their location. They're all sitting right next to the busiest sea routes in the world.
Exactly. That location was everything. It's probably the main reason they succeeded, where, a landlocked country might have struggled. They built these huge world-class ports almost right away.
So they became these essential hubs for global shipping. The perfect place to load up goods and send them out,
The perfect place. And there's another location bonus too, right? Being so close to Japan.
which had already gone through this process.
Yep. Japan had industrialized earlier, so they could sort of look over and see what worked. They didn't have to reinvent the wheel. They could learn from Japan's successes and also its mistakes.
Okay, so a tough start, but a golden location. Let's get into the strategy. How did they actually engineer this growth? If you had to pick the single most important thing they built first, what is it?
Oh, that's easy. It was their people. Without a doubt, the investment in human capital.
Education.
Massive government investment in education, building schools, training up teachers, and creating a curriculum that was designed specifically to create a modern industrial workforce.
And it wasn't just about reading and writing. They pushed specific subjects, didn't they? Like a real emphasis on math and science.
They did, because they knew the future wasn't in making simple things by hand forever. To run complex machines, to work on an assembly line for electronics, you need a workforce that gets technical concepts.
You're basically creating a whole generation of future engineers and technicians.
Precisely. And that made them super attractive to foreign companies looking to build factories. And the amazing thing is, students in those four places are still some of the top ranked in the world in math and science. That investment paid off for decades.
So you have this highly skilled population ready to go. Where do you point all that brain power? This gets us to that big strategy, export-oriented industrialization.
Right, which sounds complicated, but the idea is simple.
Break it down for us.
Most countries at the time focused on making stuff for their own people. The Tigers decided, no, we're going to make stuff to sell to the entire world. If you only sell to your own small country, your economy grows slowly.
But if you sell to America, to Europe,
Your market is huge, and you can grow exponentially faster.
so they're designing products for someone in London, not someone in Taipei. What's the first step on that ladder? What do they make first?
They started at the very bottom. Simple, cheap, easy to make stuff.
Like T-shirts, plastic toys.
Exactly. Clothes, shoes, basic household goods, things where you compete on price, not quality or tech.
But they didn't stay there. That's the important part. How do they get from making plastic buckets to making computer parts?
That's the genius of it. All the money they earned selling those simple things, all those US dollars, they didn't spend it on fancy cars or anything. They immediately plowed it back into buying better technology, faster machines, bigger factories,
Constant reinvestment.
constant, relentless. So they quickly moved up to making things like TVs, radios, and then eventually cars and electronics. They used the global market like a giant piggy bank to fund their own upgrade.
And this whole process, it wasn't just happening by itself. This required some serious top-down planning.
Oh, absolutely. This brings us to the role of the government, what some people call the developmental state.
Meaning the government wasn't hands-off.
Not at all. The government acted like a strategic CEO for the entire country. It was actively managing the economy to hit very specific growth targets.
Now, that can go wrong pretty easily. A lot of other countries tried that, and it just led to corruption. How did the Tigers get it right?
That's the key question. They succeeded because the management was super targeted and focused almost purely on one thing: exports. For example, they created these special economic zones where companies got huge tax breaks and better infrastructure.
And they helped with money, too, with funding.
They did. They'd provide low-interest loans, but only to key industries they thought could win on the global stage. Think shipbuilding in South Korea or electronics in Taiwan. And underpinning all of it, the government built the essentials: the ports, the power grids, the highways.
So the government was basically creating the perfect ecosystem for these export-focused companies to thrive.
You got it.
Let's talk about the fuel for all this, the capital.
Hmm?
You can't build all those skyscrapers and subway systems without a ton of money. Where did it come from?
It came from the people themselves. Citizens in the Asian tiger economies had incredibly high savings rates. I mean, they saved a huge portion of their income.
Why so much? Is that a cultural thing?
It's partly cultural, for sure. There's a strong emphasis on saving for the future, but the governments also make sure the banks were stable and trustworthy, so people felt safe putting their money there.
And the banks didn't just sit on that cash.
No, they funneled it right back into the system. They lent all those savings out to local businesses to modernize and expand. And because so much of the money was local,
They didn't have to borrow from abroad.
which is a huge deal for stability,
Huh.
it meant they weren't so vulnerable to global financial shocks, at least not at first. That local funding discipline really let them make that next big jump into high tech.
Right, because that's the final transition, isn't it? From making things cheaply to making things that are innovative.
Correct. By the 80s and 90s, they knew they couldn't compete on cheap labor forever, so they deliberately shifted away from things like textiles and into high technology.
And they started to specialize. Taiwan, for example, really bet big on one thing.
They bet the farm on semiconductors, those tiny little computer chips that are, the brain in every single electronic device we own, and they became the world leaders.
Meanwhile, South Korea went for these huge global brands.
Yep. Massive companies making smartphones, TVs, ships, and the smaller city-states, Hong Kong and Singapore, they couldn't build giant factories, so they became high-tech hubs for finance and telecommunications.
And making that leap, it's not just about buying new machines, it's about research and development, R&D. Why was that so important?
Because it lets you charge way more for your products. There's not much profit in a basic t-shirt. But if you're selling a cutting-edge microchip that you designed,
You can name your price.
you can name your price. It turned them from low-cost manufacturers into high-end industrial powerhouses.
All of this industrial change must have completely transformed the social landscape. You can't just build millions of factory jobs and not have people move.
Oh, it triggered one of the fastest urbanization movements in history. Millions of people left the countryside and poured into the cities.
And these cities, like Hong Kong and Seoul, became famous for being incredibly crowded.
Super dense. They had to build these massive, complex subway systems just to move everyone around. But city living, it offered access to those new jobs, better schools, and much better healthcare.
But that kind of rapid growth has to have a downside.
It definitely did. The biggest challenges were, and still are, things like crowding and really high housing costs. But for the average family moving from a farm, the trade-off was worth it.
Let's talk about that. What did this economic miracle actually mean for a regular family?
It meant everything. It meant wages went up year after year. It meant you could afford better food, better clothes. For the first time, families could buy a refrigerator, a washing machine.
Things we just take for granted.
Totally. And life expectancy shot up because of better healthcare and nutrition. Poverty just plummeted faster than almost anywhere in history. You saw the emergence of this huge new middle class.
People who could afford to travel to enjoy leisure time.
Exactly. Those social gains, that's the real success story here.
But no story like this is without a major test. For the Tigers, it came in 1997, the Asian financial crisis. What happened?
It was a perfect storm, really. International investors got spooked by the amount of debt that companies, especially in South Korea, had taken on. Money started pouring out of the region just as fast as it had poured in.
When their currencies crashed?
Their currencies just collapsed. So suddenly, the foreign debt they owed was impossible to repay.
That sounds terrifying.
It was.
Yeah.
Businesses went bankrupt. Millions of people lost their jobs. Some banks just closed. South Korea actually needed an emergency loan from the IMF to avoid total collapse.
You'd think that would be the end of the story, but they bounced back.
They did. They showed incredible resilience. But they learned a very hard lesson about financial management. They immediately put in much stricter rules for their banks, especially around foreign debt.
So they basically crisis-proofed their systems for the future.
That's a good way to put it. That painful experience actually made their financial systems much stronger in the long run.
So, bringing it all together, what's the lasting legacy of the Asian Tigers? What's the big takeaway?
The takeaway is that today, all four are fully developed, wealthy nations. They're not just copying technology anymore. They're leaders in innovation, in AI, in green energy. Their story became a blueprint for other developing countries.
It proved that this kind of rapid development, it's actually possible. You can do it in just a couple of generations if you have the right plan.
Exactly. It shows the incredible power of focused planning, hard work, and above all, investing in the brain power of your people.
The story of the Asian Tigers is really one of calculated risk and just relentless dedication. It shows how you can completely change a nation's destiny in just a few decades.
A truly remarkable story.
Good luck with your studies.